kind of gather along the walls so that we're not blocking the walkway, because this is still a pedestrian walkway and there's people biking through and stuff. And I want them to be able to still get through. Yay! So it is raining a tiny bit, so it's actually raining now. So after we finish the rally, we're just going to march up to the Sarah Doyle Women's Center, and the people that I was going to have speak at different stops along the way are just going to speak here. So I want to thank everyone for coming here today. My name is Sarah. I'm one of the... Rhode Island Anti-Sexism League, and I'm excited to be here today with so many incredible organizers and activists. The Rhode Island Anti-Sexism League, or RISAL as we call it, was formed out of a workshop I organized after Slutwalk Providence called Where Do We Go From Here? I found many aspects of the Slutwalk movement to be invaluable, namely creating a global dialogue around rape culture and sparking a flame in feminist and women's rights movement, as well as inspiring more of a female leadership in the Arab Spring and the Occupy movement. But I was also left wanting a lot more than what the one-off event was leaving in local communities. It was within this mind that I helped form the Rhode Island Anti-Sexism League in an effort to keep the dialogue going, as well as to expand the dialogue around more complicated intersections of sexism, such as sexism and class struggle, sexism and racism, sexism and gender identity, and the patriarchal oppressions of women in the LGBT community that allow rape culture to exist in the first place. It is my hope that today's event, Occupy Sexism, will help expand these conversations within our community, as well as inspire people to get involved with helping RISAL continue along in its mission of addressing and finding solutions to various aspects of sexism-based oppression in our society. And I'm going to pass it off to Audrey Ferguson real quick, but I just want to say real quickly that because we are in a tunnel at a normal rally, it's like totally fine and awesome to like chit-chat and say stuff like during the rally. But because we're in a tunnel, anything you say is going to sort of bounce off the wall, so if we could just let the speaker speak while we are talking, that would be appreciated.
Occupy Sexism came out of a group of people being fed up with a culture of catcalling and victim blaming. A culture that doesn't do enough to address violence against women, attacks on reproductive rights, and a lack of equality for the LGBT community, and economic and legislative discrimination against poor and working women as well as their families. In addition, we are fed up with our elected leaders not doing nearly enough to address these destructive forms of oppression and inequality. Rhode Island Anti-Sexism League places emphasis on the need for grassroots community organizing and action. It is with this in mind that we have asked many wonderful organizers and activists from around Rhode Island to be with us today to raise awareness in some of these issues and discuss ways that they are organizing in the community to help fight back. Please make some noise for our first speaker.
I am handling. Hey everyone, just got back from Boston. So I'm here kind of wearing one hat, but also wearing other ones as well. So I'm here representing myself, but also representing Sojourner House, which is a domestic violence agency that serves Northern Rhode Island and Providence, or honestly anyone who needs it. I'm also here representing the Center for Sexual Pleasure and Health, which is in Pawtucket. And I'm here to talk a little bit about sort of what we do and how this is connected to Occupy Sexism. Yay! One of the things that got mentioned is sort of looking at the intersections of different types of oppression and looking at what we can do on a grassroots level. My favorite thing to do is to move from grassroots and start infiltrating systems and bigger organizations as well. So I joined organizations that were a little bit more established but still kind of grassroots. And with Sojourner House, we're doing a lot of work in terms of domestic violence and ending the systems that even perpetuate that. So not just trying to provide direct assistance to people in abusive situations,
but also trying to address the systemic issues that make that even possible, which I think is a very direct connection to what Occupy Sexism is trying to do. And one of our sort of newer initiatives right now is trying to open up what domestic violence even means, and that connected to sort of things that are happening on a national level. VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, is trying to get reauthorized right now, and the thing that is mainly stopping it from being authorized right off the bat is that it has provisions for LGBTQ folks and for immigrant women, or for immigrants in general. And so those are the things that are making it not pass like it has before. And so looking at the ways that not only we're seeing these systems of oppression just in our communities, but also how the bigger systems are impacting them on a day-to-day basis. Because if that doesn't pass, the Violence Against Women Act funds a lot of domestic violence agencies, funds a lot of projects that help people in our communities survive, get housing, get shelter, get welfare, get all these different things that they need to either leave oppressive and abusive situations or even just be able to feed their kids every morning. So if you're not aware of these issues yet, I'm hoping that by me bringing them up now, you might be able to look them up and see how you can help. Calling senators, calling representatives, and doing a lot of legislative work is helpful. So if you have a minute, call your representatives and tell them, that this is important, that this passes. Another thing, so that's Sojourner House. For the Center for Sexual Pleasure and Health, what we do is mainly do education around sexual health and sexuality. And I was on a conservative radio show a few days ago. That was really fun. I was like, wow, this is awesome. I don't know who you are, but apparently it's the Laura Ingraham show. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name properly, but she's scary. She hates everything I think we all stand for. So that was really cool. She's like, I hate immigrants, and I hate gay people, and I hate women, and the war on women is bullshit. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. How you hate all the good things in the world. That's fine, that's fine. But I was on her show and she was asking, I was on her show to talk about Sex Week and sexual health and why is this necessary, why should we fund this? And it's funny how a lot of people, especially I guess conservatives, don't realize the lack of education that is not only in the school system, but the lack of education around sexual health and even feminism that pervades culture in general. We have adults that are well beyond their college years and they still maybe don't know how to talk to their doctor about their sexual health. They might not know what different body parts that they have to get checked, what those are called. So with the Center for Sexual Pleasure and Health, we try to emphasize the need for education in general, the need for people to also take ownership of that education, so that it's not always just coming from, I'm a doctor and I will look at body parts that you will never even see on your own body. So that was my doctor voice. Not to rag on doctors, but the idea that we need to have that education coming at a lot of different levels, not just a provider here who has all that knowledge, and not just we have to have that dialogue going. And so the Center for Sexual Pleasure and Health, that's what it kind of tries to do. It tries to bring in together the medical community and the people who talk a lot about pleasure and people who are like, I have a body, I want to learn about it, to get those conversations going. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is get that more into the community, and we have a few initiatives. We're hosting like a weekly discussion group at La Ritalia on Monday nights. And we're also having events at the center in Pawtucket. Please visit. It's on the bus line. It's fairly easy to get there. But the importance of that center, at least for me, is that it is a physical location that's devoted to sexual education, devoted to pleasure, devoted to educating people about their bodies and what they can do with them. And in the light of conservative forces saying like, why is this necessary? Why do we have to talk about it? Highlighting the fact that no, this is actually important, and this dialogues really well with the things that we're talking about here, ending rape culture. One of the things that I was debating the talk show lady, but also I was debating a girl from Yale, and her premise was that sexual education, especially in those instances, we have to tell people what to do because we can't trust them to make their own decisions. Obviously, I have a problem with this statement, and as I'm sure probably most of you would, and I'm making an assumption here. But they were saying that sexual education and talking about pleasure and talking about all these things promotes rape culture. I entirely disagree. And one of the reasons why I think that these dialogues are important is because they help end rape culture. They end silence. They end the oppression that makes rape culture a thing that exists. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about those two things and hope for more involvement from the community so that you know that these resources are there. And if you want to know any more about Sojourner House or the Center for Sexual Pleasure and Health, let me know. We love to be able to connect with the community and help in any way we can with whatever you need. And one thing that they asked me to talk a little bit about is also domestic violence and how that intersects with the homeless community and with just general violence. There's a really huge problem in Rhode Island with even the domestic violence agencies discriminating against people who are homeless, people who have substance abuse issues, and people who have mental health issues. So I would ask of all of you to please call that shit out when you see it. And I'm sorry for my language because there are kids here. But please call that out when you see it. call that out when you see it, because if not, if there's no accountability within our community, there's not going to be accountability coming in from the higher sources. So there's a lot of, oh, you know, I can't really get into all the details, I guess, but there's discrimination in all the layers of the pie, I guess. That's not a great analogy, that's fine. There's discrimination, all the layers of the cake, yeah, there you go. There's discrimination in all fronts, so I really urge all of you to, if you see it, you know, try to find a way to, you know, raise your voice and talk about it, or even try to find allies within those layers of the cake that can help change things. Because there's a lot of discrimination and it doesn't help people who need the help. And so I just wanted to bring that up. And, you know, again, with immigrant women, with immigrant people in general, there are no shelters in Rhode Island to help victims of domestic violence that are male. None of them. They have to go out of state. Shelters that specifically cater to or are sensitive to LGBT populations, not so much. Shelters that are really trying to help people who are immigrants and are very trained in those concerns, kind of getting there, not so much. But so we need honestly, I think we need pressure from the people that are not in those agencies and not in those groups to say, hey, where are those services? Why are those services not happening, and how can we promote a culture that will make it necessary to provide those services, not just an option. Not like, oh, we don't have time, or we don't have funding. It's like, you will do this because it's necessary. And until there's pressure from outside and from inside, that's not going to happen. So just wanted to leave you with those few words. Please pressure us. Please pressure us. And yeah, thank you.
And Ida was speaking for the role of about 3 different people just now, which is totally awesome. And I'm super, super appreciative that you came out and represented all of those voices. Next up is a member of the Providence ISO branch and a really awesome radical male ally, Paul Hubbard.
That's fantastic. I want to try to situate the origins of women's oppression, actually all oppressions, inside the capitalist system. I also want to try to talk a little bit about how we can all unite as a class to fight for the issues that are of concern to working people against the system. And I also want to take a minute to talk about a woman who was murdered, Shema Alawadi, who was brutally murdered in her home, partly because of the clothing that she chose to wear. So let's get right into it. Who benefits from women's oppression? Who benefits from sexism, racism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, homophobia? It's a system called capitalism, ruled by a tiny minority of super wealthy, mostly white men, the 1%, over the rest of us, the working class, the 99%. When Ann Romney complains, because as in her words, she chose, you see, it's all about her choice to stay home and work raising the 5 Romney robots, I mean children. That's a choice afforded her by the immense privilege of her wealth. Women in the 1% have au pairs, nannies, cooks, maids, housekeepers, gardeners to assist them. But people like my friends Mary Rabian and Brian Chodester, who are trying to raise their family, have to do double duty. They're working inside the home to raise their family, and both of them are working outside the home in jobs as teachers to financially support that family. And that is the lot of millions and millions of working class women across the world. Double duty. So very early in the development of the socialist movement, Karl Marx and Frederick Engels recognized the centrality of women's liberation to the overall project of human liberation. Marx and Engels located the source of women's oppression in the rise of class society itself, specifically with the institution of the nuclear family and women's role within it. Capitalism relies on privatized reproduction, as Marx called it, in which nearly the entire financial burden of raising children and household maintenance falls on individual working class family units. And people are these working class families are reliant primarily on the wages of one or two parents for survival. The way we see it, society as a whole should be taking responsibility for all of the human needs of all the people, including women, which would involve helping with the child care, helping with all of the services that women now provide society as unpaid labor. So as Engels wrote, working class women as proletarian wives face double burdens. The wife became the head servant inside the home, carrying out her duties in the private service of her family, but also earning wages outside the home, contributing to the financial support of her family. And to this day, the competing demands of job and family are a major source of conflict and stress for women in working class families, who, unlike Anne Romney, can't afford to hire others to help with the laundry, housework, cooking, and child rearing. Now I want to get into a little bit about what I see as the connection between other oppressions and sexism, women's oppression. They're flip sides of the same coin, especially racism. It was in late February that the news and details of the murder of Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old African-American youth who was murdered by a racist vigilante, George Zimmerman, spread throughout the country. Outrage, anger, and mass protests soon followed. Zimmerman had not been arrested or charged and was roaming free, still in possession of the gun that he had used to kill Martin, who was armed only with a bag of Skittles and a can of Arizona iced tea. Over the next 40 days, pressure from mass protests built, which finally forced the authorities to arrest and charge Zimmerman with Trayvon's murder. But adding insult to injury, Zimmerman will be released later this week on $150,000 bail to await trial on charges of only second-degree murder, even though he stalked Martin for several blocks and actually should have been charged with first-degree murder, in my opinion. Trayvon Martin was killed because he was black, and he was killed because he was young, and he was killed because he wore a hoodie. And he was killed because in post-racial America, racism and racial oppression are more ingrained and entrenched than ever. Since February 24th, across America, 18 young, mostly African Americans, mostly male, but including a couple of women, have been shot and killed by the police. One of them is Rika Boyd from Chicago, a 22-year-old African American woman whose only crime was that she was in a public park at the wrong time. Almost 1 month after Trayvon Martin's murder, on the other side of the country, a young mother of 5, Shema Alawadi, was beaten unconscious with a tire iron in her home in El Cajon, California. She died 5 days later in a hospital from her wounds. The killers left a note next to her that read, "Go back to your country, you terrorists." Shema Alawadi's brutal murder at the hands of racist xenophobes represents the intersection of xenophobia, sexism, racism, and Islamophobia that permeates American society. You see, Shema Alawadi was an immigrant from Iraq who had fled the destruction and 10-year occupation of her country at the hands of U.S. imperialism and its military and forces. Shema was a dark-skinned woman of color, but most of all, she was a woman who chose to wear a hijab, the traditional Muslim dress from her native Iraq. Shema Alawati's murder is the face of a system, capitalism, that wages wars abroad for empire and oil and wars against women, working people, and communities of color at home. It's a system that's hopelessly corrupt and dominated by the ruling elite, the 1%, which is driven to maximize profits while ignoring human needs. Women make up 52% of the world's population, but are, with their children, now over 80% of the casualties from wars. Over 2 billion people, the overwhelming majority women and children, are food insecure in the world, going to bed hungry every night. For these women and their families, health care, especially reproductive health care, is a distant prospect. In the US, women still earn 76 cents to a man's dollar, a gap that in 1970 was actually 59 cents. So that gap has closed over the years, but you have to sort of interrogate the statistics, and you find out that the reason the gap is closed is because men have actually suffered from falling wages and are actually making less. So that it's not that everybody got higher wages and we're a more equal society. And since the global economic crisis of 2008, violence against women has risen dramatically worldwide. And the segment of the population that is fastest falling into poverty is working women with children who are under 40. The second population falling quickest into poverty are women over 65, married or not, because most of them are on fixed incomes, and with all the austerity and budget cuts, their income just doesn't go as far as it used to. And the services aren't there to support them. And I think, I'm going to say this, I think after Obama maybe gets reelected, I think that's what's going to happen. He's going to push an austerity agenda that's going to be draconian. I mean, they've got Social Security, they've got Medicaid, they got Medicare, they got all sort of the basic social safety net services that people have relied on for generations on the chopping block. Let's see. Okay, so the global war on women encompasses not only gross sexism in the corporate media, which we all experience every day. You just have to turn on your TV and it's there. And it encompasses attacks on reproductive health care. And I want to give the example of this recent law, which was just signed last week by Governor Jan Brewer in Arizona. It's a package law of anti-choice legislation, but perhaps the most onerous part of it is it actually predates a pregnant woman's time of conception to the first day of her last period. So what this does, is there's a 20-week limit on being able to terminate a pregnancy. Oh, I'm sorry, Jesus. You said I had plenty of time. All right, I just want to explain this. There's a 20-week limit in Arizona on a woman's ability to terminate a pregnancy. But by predating the actual time of conception 2 weeks prior, it's actually an 18-week limit. And this also correspondingly puts limits on when women can use after conception birth control. It would knock it down from about 9 weeks to 7 weeks. There's all kinds of other provisions in this anti-choice legislation, and it's a model. This Arizona legislation is a model for all other states across the country. Let's see. I got to wrap up here. I'm sorry. I just want to. So basically, I'll just wrap up real quick. The Occupy movement adopted a beautiful slogan. I thought it was a beautiful slogan. It goes something like this: we are unstoppable, another world is possible. The new world starts, in my opinion, with the struggle for women's rights, against the war on women and their families, a struggle that has the potential to transform society into a world without women's oppression, without sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, racism. A world based on what MLK called human rights, which includes the right to decent housing, education, health care, reproductive health care, and real equality. A world where each person is free to reach their full potential, a world where liberation is not just a dream, but the reality for billions of oppressed peoples. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks, Paul. So next up, Malcolm Shanks is going to speak for you.
Good morning, everyone, or I guess good afternoon. How's everybody feeling? Yeah, good. All right. So I do not technically have an organizational affiliation per se. I'm here because I was invited to speak, so I'm just going to sort of speak from my own perspective as a very proud black queer man about what I think is my role in the feminist movement, what feminism has done for me, and then some of my humble thoughts on perhaps steps forward and ways that we can sort of broaden our scope in the fight against misogyny and sexism. So before I begin, I do want to first talk about the ways that feminism has changed my life. Feminism is absolutely necessary to re-envisioning a society in which we can all live as fully human. I want to give props to people like Audrey Lorde, June Jordan, Adrian Rich, who just passed, you know, for actually giving me a vocabulary and a practice and a means for re-envisioning myself in ways that I would like to live in my body. So I first want to just thank all the women who are here for also contributing to that body of thought and that feminist thought. You're an absolute inspiration to me, so thank you. As a black queer man, I think that it's very important that we talk about the ways in which white supremacy is highly invested in a misogynist and sexist world. I think it's very important to speak about the ways that I, in my male body, even, am constantly subjected to policing, surveillance, and negotiation of where I should be at all times because of the way I dress. Whether it's because my jeans are too tight or because I'm wearing a hoodie. Both of those are now, and have always been, things at which I could be murdered for at any moment. I think that's a very important thing to say. I think it's very important to talk about the ways in which black queer men specifically, in the words of Kenyon Farrow at the very first slut walk that was in NYC, said that black queer men are sluts for the very specific reason that we are constantly throwing into disarray both the white family and the black bourgeois family. We are constantly talked about in ways that are dehumanizing when we're talking about HIV and AIDS, and the fact that black queer men are supposed to be spreading HIV and AIDS to the black community, when in actuality, black queer men are not actually spreading HIV/AIDS to the black community at all. We do have the highest rates of HIV/AIDS, especially in places like Washington, D.C., which has HIV/AIDS rates comparable to sub-Saharan Africa. But there is very little speech, there is very little discourse given to what we actually need. Much more discourse is given to penalizing us for what we could possibly be spreading to other people. That is very important, and that is an anti-sex issue, in my opinion. On the same token, as a black man in general, it is very important that I talk about the ways that white supremacy has very specific forms of gendered violence that are enacted on my body on a daily basis. Trayvon Martin is only one of many cases that have happened recently and in the immediate past and in the history of this country especially that underscore the ways in which I am not in the right place as long as I exist. So, with that said, I would like to move on into some of my thoughts on where we can go from here with that in mind. With this sort of view about the gendered violences which support white supremacy, I would like to this is the hard thing to say. I would like to illuminate the fact that there's a very tense, unspoken problem that I have had with white feminism in general, which is that plenty of my brothers and sisters have been murdered throughout American history in support of white women's security. I do want us to talk about that, and I want us to constantly question the ways in which we negotiate the relationship between feminism and the state. Because I think we need to envision an abolitionist world, by which I mean I think we need to problematize all enslaving institutions, which includes the prison industrial complex. I think we should talk about the fact that 70% of the 2011 budget for the Violence Against Women Act was actually went to the Department of Justice, actually went to prosecutors, actually went to paying the wages of guards in prisons, actually went to building more prisons, and actually went to investing the police with the technologies that they needed to survey and police communities of color more than ever, and especially black and brown men. I think that is very important. I think that we need to envision the ways in which what would have happened if 100% of all of that money had gone to the women who needed it to make their communities safe for them. I think it's very important to talk about, once again, the ways in which we need to build our own institution, build our own houses, build our own, the Violence Against Women Act is very important for talking about public housing, for talking about domestic violence against women of color specifically, and to making communities of color safer for women of color. I think it would be a wonderful world if some of the things that were included in that were actually free abortion on demand, were actually improving the actual sort of food situation in most of those neighborhoods, we're increasing access to jobs and healthcare in general, because those are the things, access to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, those are the things which create the sort of preconditions for justice, as I would call them. The preconditions for justice are the preconditions in which women can always be safe. That is a thing that I would like to give to you all humbly as a man, as an ally to the feminist movement. Thank you very much.
We also have a few performers today as well as speakers, so we're going to have, we have a spoken word artist and Brown member Nicole Parrish.
Hi everybody, I don't usually preface my poems, but given the event that we have here today, I think it is a little necessary. I wrote this piece about a year ago when I was grappling with the fact that we live in a society that asks women who are subjected to negative physical experiences to not talk about it, and furthermore to be ashamed of themselves for having gone through the experience. And that is an injustice no matter how you look at that. So my piece talks a lot, and this is a trigger warning, gonna put that out there. It is a piece that discovers, kind of goes into that sentiment. It's also very emotionally draining, so thank you for being supporters. The sound of flesh breaking is like the slow drone of water slowly filling ears and mouths and lungs. Tiny bubbles rising towards the surface like crystal memory exhalation, cloud of childhood dancing in the sunlight, but it is less beautiful than that. It sounds a bit like the soul leaving Hendrix's guitar as it hit the stage over and over again, strings snapping in the bending tones of "Why, Father, I loved you," before lying in pieces for the world to see, but it is so much less beautiful than that. The sound of flesh breaking is like mantras of 9-year-old goddesses contemplating their mortality. "Take me home with you," she says, as she traces the treasure map of her own bruises to the X sewn over my lips so many years ago. What a funny solidarity we share with each other. It is as if we dance in each other's nightmares, but it is so much less beautiful than that. The sound of flesh breaking is not for voyeurs, not for audiences or paintbrushers or worshippers of grave beauty. It is for the quiet moments when we are lost inside our heads, left alone in the empty shell of our homes, walking the corridors with nothing but the sound of our own shaking breath to keep us company. It is for the face that appears in the mirror that does not belong to us. It is in the plurality of me, the intersection of I and we, where seeing myself as two makes it easier to lay the blame. I have seen my flesh break, unwittingly frame the frailty of my body between the crimson rage of my father's hand and the stinging hate left to rot beneath the skin. It was her fault, I tell the sallow face in 5 a.m. melancholy bathroom mirrors. This body is like seaside sculpture facing heavy tides. It is eroding. Barnacles wrapping tightly like serpents around her limbs, half-dead sea creatures crawling through her eyes, but it is so much less beautiful.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Nicole's a member of the Brown Word Group, which is an amazing spoken word group. They do amazing things in the slam poetry community here in Providence. If you ever have a chance to see a Brown Word member or multiple Brown Word members perform, I highly encourage it. What a small but awesome event we have going on. I'm feeling really great about this, and I'm glad so many of you are here. Next up on the list, we have Nancy St. Germain.
Are you ready to be excited?
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to thank all of you for coming out today. It's cold, it's rainy, but the fight that we're here for knows no limits. I'll be a blizzard. I wanted to thank you for coming to show your support for the ideals of equality and fairness for all people. Women and men of all ages, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, we are all equal. I wanted to talk to you today about the Republican war on women. The Republicans are trying to take our hard-earned rights and fought-for rights away from us. Our right to control our own health care decisions, our right to access birth control, our right to equal pay. Governor Scott Walker, not satisfied with his idea to destroy unions in the state of Wisconsin, has eliminated the equal pay law. Paycheck fairness law has been blocked and now stalled in the Senate. Would anybody like to venture against us to who? The Republicans. Abortion is not an easy choice for any woman. So any unnecessary procedure, forced ultrasounds, and even forced transvaginal ultrasounds are for the purpose of shaming a woman for her choice. As a mother of 2 children, a son and a daughter, I made the decision to not have any other children. My ex-husband refused to have a vasectomy. And you can see why he is my ex-husband. I did not want to make the very difficult choice, if I were to become pregnant again, to have an abortion. I began to make plans to have a tubal ligation. To my astonishment, for me to get my own tubes tied, I had to get my ex-husband's permission. That was upsetting and wrong to me. It was my body, not his. I thought our country was more enlightened today, but no, not the Republicans. The Republicans want to take the women back to the last century. Women and the men who care and love about them will not allow this to happen. All presidential GOP candidates jumped on the bandwagon to restrict women's access to birth control, control over their own bodies, access to having the abortion. Hell no, you guys picked the wrong sex to fight with. We will remember in November that it was the Republicans that were trying to take our rights away. I'm very upset about the blocking of the Violence Against Women Act, which has been blocked in the U.S. Senate. Why? New provisions included in the act protecting Native Americans, lesbians, gays, bisexual, and transgendered individuals are in its coverage. Are these not Americans? Are they not equal? They are to me. As a founding mother of a battered women's shelter in Attleboro, Massachusetts, I have seen firsthand how difficult it is for women to make the choice to leave for battering. Women make that very difficult choice to leave when her children are being abused or her children begin to hit her, because that's what they see, the cycle of violence. I have seen mothers and their children enter our shelter with just the clothes on their back. No time to pack. No time to grab their child's favorite toy. They live with their fear. They leave with their fear. Something that they have lived with day after day, sometimes for years. I thought I was pretty aware of violence against women, but I was not. While I was attending graduate school at Brown, I became friends with a gay woman. I was shocked to hear that she was being battered by her partner, a woman. There's no reason why this critically important bill has been stalled. Violence and emotional battering is used to control a person's thoughts and behaviors. Violence doesn't recognize race, ethnicity, sexual orientation. Violence against any human being is wrong, whether used against straight, gay, bisexual, or transgender individuals. It is time for women and the men who love them to stand up and fight back. This will be a long battle. Are you ready for the long battle? Thank you. And I want to invite all of you to attend with me the War on Women rally. It's going to be held Saturday, April 28th at the State House, beginning at 10 a.m. We're going to have great speakers, we're going to have informational tables, and we're going to have fabulous entertainment. Now is the time for men and women across the nation to stand up and protest against the war on women. Thank you.
Just so everyone knows, RISAL is actually going to have a speaker at the War on Women next Saturday as well. Uniting Against the War on Women. So a couple of things real quick. So this portion I'm allowing to go a little bit longer than originally anticipated because we're going to cut the march short because of the rain, so it's still going to even out. We're going to get there around the same time. Because we're cutting the march short, we had 2 people lined up to speak at 3 people lined up to speak at different stops along the way. One was going to be the public safety complex, and one was going to be the military recruitment center. And so instead we're going to have them speak here about the topics that they were going to speak out when they got there. I also wanted to mention really quickly that we have some events, we have like the community potluck at the Sarah Women's Center. We have some workshops, and then after that we're going to have something along the lines of speak out for anyone who wants to speak out about any sort of any cathartic thing that they need to share or express. But for people who may not be comfortable actually speaking, in lieu of traditional speak out, we're going to do it along the lines of a Finding Your Voice Writer type of workshop, as well as creating art. And then if people choose to share that afterwards, they're welcome to, but if people just need to write something out or create a piece of art or whatever they feel like they need to do at the end of the day, we're going to have that at the end of the workshops. And one of my reasons for doing that is that after Slutwalk Providence ended, so many people were standing around craving that space, wanting to speak out, wanting a chance to share and connect with people, and it wasn't there. And I felt like a lot of great, heavy disappointment from the energy there, and so I really wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity for people to share and have a release at the end of the day. So The next person up was going to speak at the public safety complex. They're going to speak for you here. That is Lindsay Goss.
We're going to march up across 95 and go over there. And because at the public safety complex, the reason we're going there was to talk about law enforcement and the criminal justice system, which has already been referenced a couple of times, and how those relate to sexism and the kind of sexism that they traffic in. And it's worth pointing out that, in fact, you know, this event was inspired by the Slut Walk protests last year. And of course, we wouldn't have the Slut Walk protests if it weren't for a Toronto police officer who told college students that if they don't want to be sexually assaulted or raped, they should not dress like sluts. So we have that law enforcement officer to thank for bringing us all here today. And in fact, you know, this was what we were responding to initially. It outraged hundreds of thousands of women and men across Canada and the US. I think they also happened outside of North America as well. And these turned into protests that rejected the logic of slut shaming and victim blaming. And as Sarah said, we want to take that and expand out from there and talk about all the other kinds of sexism that exist as well. Now, in addition to sparking all kinds of protests, the officer's comment, I think, clarified something too. It clarified the fact that we cannot, and therefore should not, expect the police to offer any protection against the sexism women face on a daily basis in any of its forms, because the law enforcement system, as I'm going to go through, is fully part of the problem. Certainly the myth of protect and serve is already very familiar to communities of color, immigrant communities, and the LGBTQ community, as Malcolm was pointing out, who face regular intimidation and criminalization, harassment and profiling, discrimination and brutality from the police. And it has already been mentioned, of course, the case of Trayvon Martin shows, and as many other cases show, it's just that one has I think, you know, become something that we are all very aware of in ways we might not be about other cases. As that case shows, the police often seem more committed to protecting racist vigilantes than defending their victims. And we can talk about this in terms of sexism as well. Women reporting sexual assault are often subjected by police officers to skepticism, victim blaming, and character assassination. Things like questions like, "What were you wearing?" and "Were you drinking?" are, you know, standard accusations, sort of masquerading as questions. Not really questions at all. And through an extension of this logic, right, sex workers are presumed incapable of being sexually assaulted. As one sex worker puts it, to gather evidence of a crime against a sex worker, the cops first have to take it seriously. If we go to the police to report abuse, we're made fun of. We're told, you deserve it. They chase you away. And because of the continual police harassment they face, many sex workers, of course, then don't bother to officially report abuse to the police. And I think a really, like, you know, sort of sensationalist example of this was in 2010 when there was like the serial killing of sex workers on Long Island, and the police wanted sex workers to come to them and tell them any evidence they might have. And of course, they're asking people who they regularly sort of, you know, criminalize and harass to come talk to them and feel safe giving them information. This really puts it in very stark terms. More recently, in New York City, police and prosecutors use possession of condoms as evidence of intent to commit prostitution. So, of course, this means not only that, like, somebody randomly walking around with condoms could somehow then be, you know, arrested for that. It also means prostitutes are less likely to carry condoms, and that's one of the main ways in which sex workers can protect themselves from some of the hazards of that kind of work. In Louisiana, I just learned about this. Sex workers are filing a civil rights suit against the Crimes Against Nature bill, which is designed to specially punish sex acts associated with gays and lesbians. Sex workers convicted under this law are then required to register as sex offenders, right? So this is clearly also, an intersection, you know, sex workers who may be men who also, you know, sex workers and sleep with other men can be specially subjected to punishment. And there are, of course, ways in which law enforcement participate in the criminalization of women attempting to control their own bodies. And there have been, like, spectacularly horrific cases of this recently. For example, the woman who was arrested and thrown in jail for a night, who was, I think, quite far along in her pregnancy, because she fell down the stairs and confessed to someone in the hospital that she had early on considered an abortion, but had gone to the hospital because she was concerned about her pregnancy. Somehow there's no doctor-patient confidentiality in this instance, and the doctor tells a police officer who arrests her and takes her to jail. Similarly, court-ordered bed rest has become a thing. So a woman in Florida who was told she needed to be on multiple months of bed rest to protect, to make sure she didn't go into early labor, was like, well, I have 2 small children at home, like I can't afford childcare, I cannot actually go on bed rest for multiple months. And then she was court-ordered to go on bed rest and threatened with arrest or prosecution if she failed to do so. And then, of course, and this almost goes without saying, I feel like people have heard about these things, but I have to talk about them because we can't not talk about them. Of course, there are the terrifying cases of police officers themselves sexually assaulting the women they are meant to protect, right? From a young lesbian woman raped in 2007 by a Providence police officer who was actually only convicted in 2010, to a 19-year-old mother in Milwaukee who was brutally raped when officers responded to her 911 call, to the off-duty cop last year who raped a 25-year-old school teacher in New York after he couldn't reach an escort service, to the case of Kenneth Moreno, a New York City officer. This was a very mediatized case, who, while on duty with another officer who was at his lookout, returned repeatedly to a drunk woman's apartment. And he claims not to have raped her. He was not convicted of raping her. But he does explain that he simply snuggled with her while she was only wearing a bra. So, whatever the hell else happened, an on-duty police officer is entering a drunk woman's apartment. And they got, he just got convicted of misconduct, right? Because that's misconduct. And there are plenty of other cases and plenty more that we never hear about, no doubt. And while the most horrific aspect of these crimes is that, is what an individual cop did to his victim, equally horrifying, and I think equally representative of the endemicness, that's not a word, of sexism in law enforcement, is the consistency with which these individual cops were surrounded by police departments and court systems that were totally happy to help in attempts to cover up their crimes. So, law enforcement, not a woman's best friend, and this, as I think is clear, this is especially true for women of color, queer and transgender women, and immigrant women who have to deal with the intersection of law enforcement sexism with also its evident homophobia and racism. The same goes for the criminal justice system more generally, from the fact that women are the fastest growing demographic in the U.S.'s prisons. There's actually a really great website called womeninprison.org that I would recommend about women in prison. From the fact that women are the fastest growing demographic, to the fact of systemic sexual, documented systemic sexual assault of women behind bars, to the common practice of shackling women prisoners during childbirth. Only 4 states actually explicitly outlaw shackling women during childbirth. Shackling is apparently also commonly used by federal marshals who are transporting pregnant, undocumented workers back across the border to prevent them from, God forbid, giving birth in the U.S. And let's talk about what women are being jailed for, because I think this opens it up into a lot of other issues as well. For example, people may have heard of this case, Kelly Willems Bowler, I'm not sure if I'm saying her last name correctly, of Ohio, who was convicted of a felony for saying her kids lived with their grandfather so that they could attend a public school in his neighborhood, which was better than the public school they would have had to attend if they were using her address. So in other words, women of color, like Kelly Willems Bowler, who disproportionately face the reality of sending their children to suffering, underfunded, understaffed schools, can be sent to jail and convicted of a felony for trying to give their kids a better education. Raquel Nelson, who depended upon public transportation and who was crossing a 4-lane highway to get home when a truck driven by an intoxicated, partially blind man struck her and 2 of her children, killing her son. She's another example. This black woman, convicted by an all-white jury, none of whom regularly used public transportation, ended up facing more jail time than the driver that killed her son. These are 2 women that are in jail. I mean, that's it. And I think what I want to link that to is the fact that they're being criminalized for doing what women are told they're supposed to do as mothers, which is look out for the interests of your children, try and send them to a better school, a woman who is dealing with having 3 children that she has to get home on her own using public transportation. So I think this speaks to this other level of it, which is the impossible dilemma of work and childcare that low-income women are somehow supposed to manage. So failing to show up for work can of course cost you your job and then your ability to support your children, and you might end up facing having them taken away from you. But you can also of course be jailed if you leave your children at home in order to go to work so you don't lose your job, right? Women are essentially criminalized for failing to be able to afford childcare, even as they might work multiple jobs for much more than 40 hours a week. And this is just I know someone else is going to talk about the military, but fit into this. In 2010, the Army tried to court-martial a mother who missed deployment because she had no one to care for her infant son. She was a single mother with no one else to care for her son. So anyway, I'm going to wrap up now. It was like hard to trim all the things that can be talked about in this context. But there's a larger point here, which is that neither police nor our current criminal justice system actually exist to serve the needs of ordinary people. I firmly believe this. I know that in theory they're supposed to, and that's the way we think about them often, but I just don't think it's true. I don't think they're here to serve the needs of ordinary people, including women, the LGBT community, communities of color, immigrant communities, sort of working people generally who don't have the resources to, as Paul was talking about, to pay for help with all of this stuff. How else do we explain the fact that the vast majority of incarcerated individuals have been convicted of only the most minor of crimes, a number of which, such as drug possession and use, by the way, are going on without any repercussions at Brown University right now at Charter Spring Weekend? I'm serious. It's seriously, you can do whatever the hell you want up there, and then the same exact activities are utterly criminalized in other communities. The fact that police have proved a reliable enemy of protests for social and economic justice, even when these protests are entirely peaceful. The fact that the architects of the ongoing economic crisis face no criminal prosecution. The fact that when a vicious crime is committed by a police officer, the entire apparatus of law enforcement and criminal justice rise up to protect that officer from the consequences of his actions. I think we've seen clearer than ever lately through attempts to suppress the Occupy movement whose side the cops are on. I don't think they're on ours. And I want to say more generally that what I think is so important about RISAL is that I think part of our recognition of the way things are is that we have to fight against this stuff. We can't, unfortunately we can't just lobby about it, we can't just vote about it. We actually have to organize on a super grassroots level. I love that Howard Zinn quote, it's not who's sitting in the White House, it's who's sitting in the White House. And if you look historically, Republicans, Democrats, how the legislation falls, not always so much about whether the Republicans or Democrats. It has a lot more to do with what all of us are saying and doing and making happen.
When I was born, my father gave me my mother's name. Heavy at first, as if each letter were hewn from mountain rock, it was an odd thing of odd sound my peers thought fun to poke and prod. They didn't realize. They didn't know. The Vikings handed down names like heirlooms, syllables bequeathed like amulets carrying the attributes of ancestors. It was hoped a child would absorb the meaning those words represented. Arvid, steadfast, noble eagle, Gunhild, a long battle cry, war. These names have a place. Speak them and taste the sea salt, the rocky earth, the metallic tang of stolen gold. My mother's given name is Astrid Seed. My mother's given name is Astrid, beautiful God, divine strength, seen, new victory. In Sweden, the shores are wildernesses of crags. Stone slabs chomp on lapping waters like jagged teeth. The forests are quiet and watchful, their tangled feet covered in layers of moss. Strawberries are tiny and sweet, and sunlight is a rare and blessed thing. She grew there with a sister and a brother. The language they spoke whispers still. I see her looking for that place sometimes out the window when crocuses are just beginning to bloom. My mother's name is Beautiful God. She learned American slang working hospital wards where she pumped a dying man's heart with her hand, or on the road hitchhiking alone across Montana, or during dinners with a funny family and a handsome man, every blush a blood right initiation into a new life. My mother's name is divine strength. In Swedish, the word for mother is mor, another name that translates to a child's reaching hands, a second helping, a yearning so powerful it demands a portion of the body to be sacrificed. Before watching her daughter fly over Atlantic waves, my grandmother gave a kiss and relinquished a piece of her heart as a tree surrenders leaves to the winds of fate. Strength is more than musculature. A spirit will endure when the flesh fails. The Vikings knew that. Despite their blunderbuss tactics, Gunhild is a woman's name. In sagas and tales, female wrath was waged through daggers slicing across throats. I have daggers sheathed in my eyes, and I swear there is steel layered like silver thread into my mother's bones. She is a skyscraper, bending with a trembling world, and yet is daily astonished with my freedoms. I hope I am astonished with my daughter. The pride and power she will carry out the door in her quicksilver veins will run a hereditary iron will. Because my name does not mean princess or flower or frailty. I am sky. I am God's strength, the serene, sublime beauty of evening stars. And if I have a daughter, she will wear this name like an amulet. I will name her Seed. I will name her Victory, because that is what she will be.
Thank you, Astrid. So we have 2 more speakers and 1 more performer for you. And then we're going to march straight up to the Sarah Doyle Women's Center. If you have somewhere to go, but you could do the march route with us, that would be really, really wonderful, because it'd be nice to have as big of a energized group marching up the hill to pick up our spirits and march through the rain to the Sarah Doyle Women's Center as possible. And we have tons of signs and banners for everyone to carry. And umbrellas. So I'd really love as many people to join the march as possible. And then we're going to have lots of delicious food up there when you get there. It's a community potluck. I have some fun exercises to do while we eat, and then we're going to start our workshops. We have 2 workshops starting at 3, one on the role of men in the women's movement and feminist movement and anti-sexism movement, and one on women in the workplace and negotiating equal pay. And then starting at 4, we have 2 more sets of workshops, one on sex workers' rights and one on how to do clinic defenses. And then that will be followed by the writers' workshop, speak out workshop. So we have, next is Chris Murphy, and he was going to speak at the Military Recruitment Center. Instead, he's going to be speaking here for you all.
So every day the war on women becomes more oppressive in this country. This includes how the U.S. military treats its women soldiers here and around the world, and also how they're treated here within the United States. So the National Guard Recruiting Center is one of the places that women are recruited to join the military. When the war on terror began, both Democrats and Republicans said that the fight against terrorism is a fight for the rights of Afghani women. That's essentially what they were saying. They said that they would save the oppressed Afghani women, but the military that fights for imperialism and occupies countries does not liberate women. The U.S. still backs the warlords in Afghanistan who are responsible for the rape and murder of women. A major issue facing women in the military is that of sexual assault. Sexual assault within the ranks of the military is not a new problem. It's a systemic problem. Soldiers rape civilians, and soldiers also rape soldiers. During the recent massacre in March, 16 Afghani men, women, and 9 children were slaughtered. And 2 women were also raped before the soldiers killed them. The military, like most institutions within a capitalist society, is a sexist organization. Despite the Defense Department's zero-tolerance policy, there were over 3,000 sexual assaults reported in 2011. The Pentagon estimates that 80 to 90% of all sexual assaults go unreported, so the actual number is probably closer to 17,000, 19,000. What does it tell us that U.S. soldiers deployed overseas stop drinking water after 7 p.m. to reduce the odds of being raped if they have to use the bathroom at night? Or that a soldier who was assaulted when she went out for a cigarette was afraid to report it for fear that she would be demoted for having gone out without a weapon? Or that a female soldier in Iraq is more likely to be raped by a fellow soldier than is to be killed by enemy fire? According to the Department of Defense's own statistics, 74 to 85% of soldiers convicted of rape or sexual assault leave the military with honorable discharge, meaning rape conviction does not appear in their records anywhere. Only 2 to 3% of soldiers accused of rape are even ever court-martialed, and only 5 to 6% of all soldiers accused of domestic violence are ever court-martialed. A recent CNN investigation interviewed women in all branches of the armed forces, and they tell their stories that follow a similar pattern. When sexual assaults are reported, a command is dismissive of the allegations, and then the soldier receives a psychiatric discharge with the diagnosis of personality disorder diagnosis rather than the possibility of assessing the person with post-traumatic stress disorder. In the military's eyes, a personality disorder diagnosis is a pre-existing condition and does not constitute a service-related disability. That means sexual assault victims with personality disorder charges don't receive benefits from the Department of Veterans Affairs to help with their trauma. There are other costs, for example, and members of the armed forces who receive a personality disorder discharge lose education benefits as well under the GI Bill. Besides losing these benefits, soldiers face emotional trauma and many are suicidal. Unfortunately, there are limited mechanisms to address actual issues of sexual assault within the military. If higher-ups don't follow up on allegations, there's no other recourse for these allegations of sexual assault to be addressed. So no person should ever be subjected to a work environment with such reckless disregard for the safety and well-being of its employees. This can no longer be tolerated as standard operating procedure within the military. Finally, I would like to say that the amount of money that is given to the military-industrial complex is in itself an assault and crime against women and children. The billions spent every week by the military to commit heinous acts against humanity can be better used providing for the basic needs of women and children in our society. Schools could be built rather than torn down, free child care could be provided, free health care for all, including adequate mental health care coverage. And food and housing could also be provided for all. Rather than bombing our societies into oblivion, we could be building a society that provides for women and children of our communities.
Next, we have a local folk singer and longtime member of the Providence Poetry Slam, Jan Luby.
I was crying through a lot of the speakers and the poetry. I'm just very moved by all of you being here. And one of the things, I'm not here to talk, but I've been fighting for women's rights since I was a teenager. I volunteered for the Margaret Sanger Research Bureau in New York when I was 17. I'm 59. So I remember when Roe versus Wade was not in place yet. And I remember that women with money could go to London and have a safe and legal abortion. And so I wanted to say to you, it is not a long battle. It is a forever battle. Because if we let our guard down for a second, I mean, why are we still fighting for these things? I thought, we got somewhere. So, and watch each other's backs. I just want to say, I worked for the Kitty Genovese Women's Project in New York. I don't know if anybody knows who she was, but She was killed when people in New York apartment houses looked out of their windows and did nothing. So obviously if the police aren't going to help us, we need to always watch out for each other. It doesn't matter if that person looks different from you. Help them. So watch each other's back. Anyway, this is Raw Sugar song. Raw Sugar's a duo out of the Northwest, and nobody's doing these songs on the East Coast, so I've elected myself to do some of them. I get the message from the media. It tells me what I can be. Vidal Sassoon and Max Factor, Claire and Mabel Amy. And Estee Lauder tells me that I gotta buy a bottle of glamour to get a man enamored of me. I got the message from the media. It tells me what I can be. And it says girls should only look a certain way, or else they ain't A-okay. You gotta wear the right makeup on your face, or else you're grossing out the whole human race. Forget about the beauty that comes from within. To be beautiful, be anorexic thin. All girls gotta look a certain way, or else they ain't A-okay. I got the message from the media. It tells me we should be thin. Diet Cola, Tab, and Diet Shasta, weight clinics, and Dexedrine. And Pierre Cardin tells me that I can't wear unless I buy his jeans and I'm looking real lean, yeah. I got the message from the media. It tells me we should be thin. And it says girls should only look a certain way, or else they ain't A-okay. You gotta wear the right makeup on your eyes. If you ain't no package, honey, you can't be no prize. Forget about the qualities, being honest and strong. If you look like yourself, honey, you just don't belong. All girls gotta look a certain way, or else they ain't A-okay. I got the message from the media. It tells me what I can be. Compulsive cleaning lady, meddling mother-in-law, prostitute or beauty queen, and always a victim, a helpless ex-kitten, victim of the rape and the stabbing, kidnapping. I got the message from the media. It tells me what I can be, and it says girls should only act a certain way, or else they ain't A-okay. Always be willing, never get mad, or they call us bitch. They tell us we're bad. And girls never fart, they only fluff. We're all body and heart, never think serious. All girls gotta look a certain way, or else they ain't A-okay. Girls gotta act a certain way, or else they ain't A-okay. Girls gotta sing a certain way, or else they ain't A-okay. All girls gotta look a certain way, or else. This is also a Raw Sugar song. Linda Shearman and Kirsten Anderberg. Kirsten's now doing, she dresses up as a nun, as a pregnant nun, and does outrageous songs on the street by herself now. And Linda's in a band, last I heard, called Venus Envy. Anyway. That myth in Genesis is something to break my heart with. Woman as weak temptress is an image I'm glad to part with. Tell it to the girls from the very young, it's a sure way to keep them under your thumb. Wow, that myth in Genesis, something to break my heart with. That repeats if you want to sing it later. Now before you get mad and walk away, saying that feminist is gonna burn in hell someday. Or you think I'm a fool, or maybe a liar, or really do believe there's a power that's higher. But it ain't no man sitting up in the sky saying women are weak, so we must suffer inside. Wow, that myth in Genesis, something to break my heart with. That myth in Genesis is something with which to break my heart. Eve was the temptress, the apple she ate, and all the evil in the world it had its start. Teach it to the boys by the time they're 5. The boys will blame the girls for the rest of their lives. Oh, that myth in Genesis, something to break my heart with. That myth in Genesis is something to break my heart with.
woman as we tempest, our glad carpet,